what were you feeling when your dad's kind of in this limbo of potentially going to prison for a very long time?
My dad was gone, was like being with all my friends who their dad was right there.
When you max out your physical pain as a man, you start to open yourself up to the emotional pain that you felt.
And I said, if I had $100,000 sitting here when you got here on time, would you get here on time? And he was like, well, yeah. I was like, so you just don't want it. At the same time, it was really difficult to be like, man, like, why would God take my dad away, who was like my hero?
That's the separator. It's discipline. That's what Tom Brady said. He says a lot of guys can get up 1 or 2 days a week and be on time, hit the gym, hit the training. Who can do that for a month? Who can do that for 6 months? Who can do that for a year? Who can do that for a decade?
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So, dude, I heard you're just putting up a plant here in Arizona. Welcome to this neck of the woods.
Thank you, man. Yeah, we just signed the lease on the warehouse and making it happen. So we're moving the whole operation down here. So
cool. Awesome. Well, let's kick it off. So today we're bringing to the Bridging the Gap podcast for the very first time in person, Braven, and he is an incredible individual. I actually saw him speak at Funnel Hacking Live back in 2021. And so I'm really excited to connect today, hear what you've been up to since then. I know you've had some hiccups.
Yeah.
He's in the supplement business. He's got a really cool company where his number one product that he sells is creatine. And we're going to get into some crazy stories that he was literally just sharing with me behind the scenes where he almost lost the business due to a creatine worldwide shortage.
Yeah.
So before we get into all that cool stuff, though, I would love to just first take a step back and figure out like who Braven is, like down at the core. Like where did you come from? Where did you grow up? How did you develop into, because I think there's really 3 stages to developing as a man. There's kind of boyhood, which is 0 to 7.
Yeah.
And then you have 7 to 14 as you're starting to get into like adolescence, 7 to 16, 14. And then from like 16 to 25, and I was watching one of your pieces of content the other day and you were saying, right, when you hit 25,
now I got the full brain now.
So hopefully you're not making any dumb boy decisions anymore like I still am at 23. But nonetheless, man, excited to have you here, dude.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thanks.
So to kick it off, where did you grow up?
So I mean, I'm from here in Arizona, but a small town, like
Okay.
2.5 hours from Phoenix, this area, Scottsdale. It's called Pima, Arizona. It's a tiny town of 2,500 people. I mean, my graduating class in high school had like 50 people. So super small town. It's a very unique way to grow up in a small town like that. It's hard, I guess, to explain unless you've done it. But yeah, so I grew up in that small community, which is great. I loved it. And I've moved around a little bit. I lived in Portland and Vancouver, Washington area for a couple of years, and then been back here and mostly lived in that little town of Pima my whole life. So.
What's your favorite part about living in Arizona?
I love Arizona. Like people are like, oh, it's so hot there. But I'm like, it's hot here 2 to 3 months a year, but the other 9 are amazing. Like you can be outside in December with like a long sleeve shirt on and feel great. Like I love being here because I love being outside and just enjoying it all year. So.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, what you're wearing right now is pretty much the max of what you're going to need here in Arizona.
I know,
right?
it's probably kind of like too hot to be wearing this, like a long sleeve and stuff.
It's a true Arizona man right there. I love it, dude. So were you homeschooled? Did you go to public school?
Yeah, no, I went to public school, Pima High School. It's, the most
50 people.
Yeah, 200. I think there's like 220 kids of the whole school.
Yeah.
While I was there, and I mean, everyone's names, like the teachers know your parents. So like, there's good things about that, and things that like suck to. They're like calling your parent, or they're like going to church with you on Sunday, and it's like your best friend's mom's also the teacher, and. Anyway, but it was also a fun way to grow up, and I feel like, a lot of the values that I hold like come from that community. So
cool, man. And I want you to imagine for a second, the audience, you and I, and we also got your COO behind us watching the podcast live. Shout out to the man, Caleb.
Yeah.
And we all go back and are like ghosts of like Christmas past, right? And we're watching, let's say, 9-year-old Braven. Okay. On a afternoon school, he's just getting out of school.
Yeah.
What's going through his head? What's he experiencing emotionally? What's his favorite part about life? Is he going through a tough time? Is he on riding his high horse? What was that 9-year-old Braven like?
Man, that's an interesting question. That I have a pretty wild upbringing experience, I guess you could say. Okay. I was like the biggest dreamer as a kid. I would still consider myself someone that people would label as a dreamer, and I feel like it was said negatively to me all growing up, but now it's something that I hold as like a badge of honor. Really, like it's a piece of my identity that I love more than anything. But I mean, when I think about who 9-year-old Braven was and if he'd be proud of me now, like absolutely not. Like he's like, dude, we were supposed to be in the NBA. We were supposed to be like flying around on private jets. So I'm chasing his approval endlessly now, and in a funny way. But like he just believed like anything was possible, and I feel like I would like come out of Star Wars movies and be like, okay, I'm literally going to use the Force like in my life. You know, it's like I just really believed in the power of like my mind. And my dad, always growing up, had us reading self-development books since I was a tiny kid. I mean, he read to us every single night growing up, and they weren't usually like the Bernstein Bears. Well, maybe when I was like 3, but they quickly became like, the Compound Effect, Think and Grow Rich, like The Millionaire Next Door. Like those were the books he was reading to us like nightly. So.
Wow. And, I know we have a mutual friend, Caleb Maddox, Matt Maddox. Shout out to the Maddoxes.
Yeah, I love them.
Did your dad do any sort of like $20 when you finished this book, kind of like Matt did?
It was $10 a $10
was
a
it?
book. $10 per nonfiction book. So that kind of got me started reading. And even though I hated like school and those things, like I kind of loved reading from the side of like personal development. And so my whole life, like that's just been a part of me growing up is, my dad's a huge believer in, energy and frequency and like, creating what we want in this world. And so he really instilled that in us and through reading and stuff. And so, I mean, at 9, like I had all these dreams and hopes, but we were also going through like a really hard time as a family. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had built some really big businesses. But then also we had some really challenging times and, not to get into the whole story, my dad ended up going to prison for 5 years when, from basically when I was 10 to 15. So 9 years old, we were going through all of that from like a legal perspective. And, I think that as a 9-year-old kid, I was still so hopeful that it would all work out the way in my head it was going to. And then I think as it started to shape out that it wasn't, that was like the first, hit of like reality as a kid of like, I would say it shook my belief a little bit of like, man, I was praying every night and I was, envisioning that my dad wouldn't, get convicted and like all of these things. And then it didn't go that way. And it felt like a chink in my armor, I would say, as a kid, and made me question a lot of things. And I feel like I've like envied and tried to build back to that belief I had as that little like innocent kid.
What's going on, guys? It's Bridger. Listen, a lot of you guys watching the podcast want to know how you guys can get a hold of me. Best way is to join my Bridge Builder Brotherhood and shoot me a DM on school. First link in the description. You've got exclusive content, monthly coaching calls with me, and I'm posting all the time in there. It's like our own little social media platform. First link in the description, completely for free. Let's get back to the podcast.
But anyways, it was a hard time for like my family. And so I feel like even as a kid, I felt that pressure and that weight of like what was going on in our world.
What were you processing at 9 years old? Because the one of the things that I've realized, and I love personal development, right? Yeah. I've read the books, I've done the seminars, I know a lot of people in the space, and one of the things that I realized is that when we were little kids, like we didn't have the tools that we have now to be able to process difficult times. We don't have the people, the support systems. Yeah. So what were you feeling when your dad's kind of in this limbo of potentially going to prison for a very long time?
Man, no one's asked me these questions. It's like I've done a lot of like self-development stuff and tried to like kind of dive into this stuff and understand like what were the negative beliefs I created during that time. Yeah. What are the positive ones? Because there is a ton of positive that come out of that has come out of that time in my life. I would say like at that time, I was very hopeful. Like I still had this belief like that God, I've always had like a strong faith as a kid. I grew up in a Christian home, and I believe that God was like an advocate for us, and like that he wants to promote and protect us in our lives. But I think that honestly, as a kid, like that experience kind of made me question that and I think the biggest factor, especially once my dad was gone, was like being with all my friends who their dad was right there. And I had a lot of amazing friends and family who kind of stepped up, and almost like other parents' fathers who I think maybe felt like they wanted to like help me have still more like of that presence in my life while my dad was gone physically. And so that was great. But at the same time, it was really difficult to be like, man, like, why would God take my dad away, who was like my hero, who, and I could get into that story, but like who didn't do anything to warrant what was happening. And like all of these things that I was questioning of like, why is this happening to me and not the other kids? And now that belief has shifted for me. But at that time, it definitely was like, why is this happening? Like, why would God do this to us? And I think it did give me a lot of fear around like, man, what if I create something and it all gets taken away from me? Because that's what I watched happen to my dad. He built a big, super successful company, had like, was doing all this amazing stuff. And then it seemed as though like the world came and like took it away from him. And so that was a fear of mine, I think, that developed at that time that, it's still around. But I think I've at least learned to manage it at some level to make it productive, I would say.
Wow, yeah, this is a great podcast, dude. I appreciate you opening up. And one of the things that I've learned recently is like, for a long time in how you're raised and those beliefs that you develop, sometimes you don't even know that they're so deep in the subconscious mind that they just kind of you're operating almost by this like I don't even know how to describe it, like control. A spell. Yeah, a cruise control or a spell that's upon you. You don't even know you have a spell upon you. And I went to this event recently that has completely changed the game for me. It's called Rise Up Kings by one of my friends that I met, Skylar, and shout out to those guys. But one of the things that they identified when I was going through like immense physical pain, it was like a Navy SEAL Hell Week, was that when you max out your physical pain as a man, you start to open yourself up to the emotional pain that you felt. Yeah. Right? And so what I'm hearing you say is that at the time you had a bunch of emotional pain and you didn't know what was going on. And I think you brought up a great question, which is I'm also a man of faith, grew up a Christian as well. And, for non-believers, one of the biggest questions that I'm sure you can agree with is why do bad things happen to good people? Why does God allow that? Yeah. That's basically what the question you were asking. And I'm sure for the audience watching, you've been somewhere in your life where something bad has happened. You're like, well, I didn't do anything to deserve this happening to me, this extremism. How did you process that now, fast forward 10, 15 years? Where are you at with that now? And what would you share with the audience?
Yeah, that's the question of why does God do, or why does God, I wouldn't say do, but why does God let bad things happen to good people? I think that was the question at 9 years old that I had, was like, what did my family do to deserve this? And I think sometimes growing up in a religious home, there is a little bit of that feeling of like, well, we're going to get punished if we don't obey. And then, so like, which is, I think, there's truth inside of that, but also at the same time, it can become a little bit too aggressively making everything God's doing it to you because you did something wrong or right or whatever. But, Alex Hormozy talks about this. Like, if you want to develop patience, would you give yourself, or if you want to develop patience in a kid, are you going to give him everything he wants as soon as he asks for it all the time, without ever making him work for it? Or to help him develop patience, are you going to make him work for things and wait for things and say, hey, you can have it at this point down the road, and like make him struggle to get it? Or if you want him to develop discipline, are you going to give it to him easy, or are you going to make it a struggle? And I think that's God's relationship with us. Like I believe he wants me to be a man that can inspire and impact the world in a positive way. And he wasn't going to create that type of man by giving me everything as easy as possible and without any hardship. I believe all of those things have like uniquely set me up to impact people around me in my life in a meaningful way that I wouldn't have the ability had I not been through those things, especially at 25, like especially being this young and having been blessed with the responsibilities and success that I've been blessed with. I wouldn't be able to do the right things with it had I not already experienced immense struggle and pain and trial all growing up. So
totally. So let's go back to that 9-year-old kid. He's confused. He's asking these questions. He turns 10. His dad's no longer in the picture. What's going through your head then? Once things have been solidified, and if you don't mind sharing, I'd actually love to hear what was the reason. Because you said that, what's the story there?
Anyway, so I'm totally happy to share. I don't often share it publicly, mostly just because it's a long story. And I don't always want to take up the whole time talking about my story. But essentially what happened was my mom passed away when I was 3 years old. And my parents were on a hike in Timpanogos, Utah. My mom fell and broke some ribs. And when they got home from the trip, she had Ambien, which is like a sleeping medication, to help her sleep. And she took a bunch of the Ambien to help her sleep, and then couldn't sleep and ended up going and taking a bath and then falling asleep from the Ambien and drowning. And my dad ended up finding her and getting her to the hospital and trying to resuscitate her herself and all this, all this stuff. But she ended up passing away in the hospital that next day. And nothing happened at that point. And then 2 years later, my dad had built a very successful company. And not all of them, but a bunch of my mom's siblings, my aunts and uncles, they worked for my dad. And these siblings of my mom's who worked for my dad, they all had pretty high level positions in the company, were making great salaries. This is in the 2004 or 5 time period. The company is he had built a multi-8-figure company, and so they're doing really well. And
what was the company?
It's called Optimal Health Systems. It's still his company actually to this day.
Oh, wow.
He's kept it alive through some pretty insane stuff, including going to prison for 5 years.
That's insane.
Yeah.
What does that company do real quick? And then we'll get back into it.
So my dad, he trains health professionals all over the world to use holistic routes for healing over the typical pharmaceutical routes and things like that. So he formulates and manufactures whole food supplements and trains doctors specifically how to use those for healing their patients. So that's obviously how I got into, we can talk about that, how that all started too later, but into the health world, into the fitness world, that all was inspired by like who my dad's been for the last 40 years and what he's done. And he's one of the smartest minds walking the earth when it comes to health and holistic healing. So anyways, that's what his company focuses on and is really good at. So.
That's cool. Does your dad have any, is it just supplements or do they have like any sort of SaaS like system or software? Or?
Yeah, so they have training a lot like for these doctors, and then they have like the supplements on the back end, their whole food alternatives. But then they also he has a kind of an internal secondary brand called Nutrients RX where they have a software that you get your blood work done, analyzes all your blood work line by line, every nutrient deficiency and all that, and then can make recommendations on how do you, move those numbers into for optimal health, which is the name of his company. So that's something that's
wild.
Yeah, it's a really powerful.
You want to hear something crazy?
Tool. Yeah.
My company or my mom owns a company, and we won't get into it. It's called DNA Optimal Health.
Really?
I'm not kidding.
What?
I swear to God. Hers is only 2-3 years old, but it's very similar.
Yeah.
I think we even use some of the blood work.
Yeah.
But then we use DNA as well.
Wow, that is
Isn't that crazy? Me and Braven here are 2 peas in a pod. This is nuts.
That is
grew up Christians.
That is crazy.
Almost the same age.
What's your mom's
couple
name?
good-looking cats. My mom's name is Dr. Gail Rogers.
Dr. Gail Rogers. That's awesome.
What's your dad's name?
Douglas Grant. Yeah.
Nice.
So I mean, yeah, they might know each other. It's a small world. So
yeah, they might be using the same. I don't know. Yeah, that's cool, man.
Awesome.
Okay, so getting back into it, dude. First off, man, that's insane.
Yeah, you were like, I don't know if you're gonna have any insane stories to talk about, like the guy. And I was literally like, well, as long as you didn't ask me about my childhood, then I won't have any insane stories. And then you're like, 9-year-old Braven. Like, okay, well,
and we go straight for it.
We'll go in there.
So I'm sure the audience feels this way as well. We know where the story's going, unfortunately. So mom's 3, she has a fall, has trouble sleeping, drowns.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So, like I said, my dad had this company that he'd built. All my aunts and uncles, or a bunch of them, worked for my dad. And about 2 years after my mom dies, they are still all working for my dad. And they create a rebellion. I don't know if that's the proper word, but they essentially got all of the employees that were working for my dad and said, hey, we are going to overtake the company. And so my dad showed up to work. This company that he'd built, it was his baby, and they said, hey, you're essentially going to give us majority stake of the company or we're all going to leave. And my dad was like, you can get lost. Like that's like not going to happen. I've given you guys all the opportunities in the world to like be here and be a part of this, but like this is my company and no one's going to take it from me. So they all left, thought the company would fail without him, and he kept it alive and kept growing it. And then about 3 months after that happened, one of those aunts went to the police and basically said, I think that Doug Grant killed my sister, my mom, and opened up this case. Anyway, so it's a wild thing, because she basically said, I don't even know how this is like legally a thing, but basically said that she had a dream about it and that they needed to investigate it. They opened it up, investigated it. They're like, there's nothing there. Closed it. It opened up. They went back again, opened it a second time, closed it. Nothing happened. A judge ruled it out twice. Like there's just nothing here. Like this is not a case. Then they went to someone who worked for my dad, a guy who kind of struggled, like his whole life, struggled with alcohol and stuff. And my dad had helped him out. Like he was a single dad, and I remember us going over there and bringing Christmas presents to his family. And anyways, he just worked for my dad, like odds and end jobs. Like my dad would just want to kind of like helped him out. And they went to this guy. His name was Jim Megley, and they basically did an interview with Jim where they said, hey, we'll give you $50,000 if you'll tell us what you know about Doug Grant killing his wife. So he makes a statement, and I can't remember what the tactic's called. It's like an investigation tactic. There wasn't actually $50,000. Like it was just like a lie to like, they say it's a lie to like get them to tell the truth, but I mean, essentially just like coerce the guy to say what they wanted. Yeah. And end up not giving him the $50,000. And it's actually, that's a really sad part of the story is that guy ended up dying shortly after that, after he didn't get the money. And
did he kill himself?
Yeah, I mean that's the word on the street. So I don't know.
But we don't know what was it, mysterious death or or you can't say. Or
he was in his house and the house was lit on fire. So we don't know.
Sad.
Yeah.
To think that someone would give their life away or put themselves in a situation over $50,000.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is there was not to get off track here, but there was a statement that was said by, I can't remember who was in my world recently, said, if someone were to pay you $1 million, oh, I know who it was. I was watching Andy Elliott, Bradley, and Wes Watson all at the Lion's Den down the road. And Wes was saying, why aren't you guys motivated to get up and get after it? Get up early, go crush it. Yeah. He's like, if I gave you guys $1 million, you know what's funny though? When I was like growing up, I was homeschooled, so my mom had to figure out how to influence me all the time. She was constantly influencing me, games, and I was really competitive. Yeah. So if she put a timer on it, or she said, this is one thing she said, if I paid you $1 million to go find the flower on the shelf, I'd be like, Mom, I can't find it. Could you find it?
Yeah. Oh, you'd make a flower.
I know. I went back and found it. I went and walked 20 miles to the store and brought it back, right? So it's funny that you say that because it's so sad to see that like this guy gave up on this situation, false hope, over $50,000. Because Wes was saying, if I give you $1 million to wake up in the morning, I bet you'd be getting after it, right?
Yeah, you'd be stoked.
You'd wake up at 4:30 no matter what happened. Now, if I said, I'll give you $1 million, but you don't get to wake up in the morning, would you take the $1 million?
Absolutely not.
You wouldn't take it, right? So guy.
Yeah, I had an employee one time who kept showing up late,
What's going on, guys? It's Bridger. Listen, a lot of you guys watching the podcast want to know how you guys can get a hold of me. Best way is to join my Bridge Builder Brotherhood and shoot me a DM on school. First link in the description. You've got exclusive content, monthly coaching calls with me, and I'm posting all the time in there. It's like our own little social media platform. First link in the description, completely for free. Let's get back to the podcast.
And I told him that if he showed up late again, I would have to let him go. I was like, I just need people who are committed, and if that's not you, it's okay. But like, I'm just have to let you go. And he shows up late, and so I called my office and I was like, hey, I'm gonna have to let you go. Like, you don't want to be here. And he said, no, it's not that I don't want to be on time. It's just that I struggle with being late. But gave a bunch of excuses. And I said, if I had $100,000 sitting here when you got here on time, would you get here on time? And he was like, well, yeah. I was like, so you just don't want it. Like, you just don't want it. And it's just, I mean, it's interesting that when you have to like try and bribe yourself into doing those things, but it's also like the 100,000 is on the other side, or the million is on the other side of waking up excited. It actually is the result down the road. It's just not immediate gratification. But anyway,
it's the compound.
Yeah.
You're going to do that. And that was the separator. I was in Miami at PBD's Vault conference. You ever been to one of those?
I haven't.
Dude, it's probably one of the best, if not the best, like big scale personal development events.
Wow.
3,000 people. He brought in Tom Brady, Mike Tyson, Will Garudo, the guy who wrote Unreasonable Hospitality.
Yeah.
And so when Tom Brady was up there, I love Tom Brady. I'm a big Patriots fan, love football. You a football guy?
I mean, yeah, I'm not so in it today.
Okay.
But I grew up loving sports.
Who was
and
your
football,
team then
so,
back in the day?
I mean, I love the Cardinals because I'm an Arizona guy, but anyway, I also like the Dolphins. But
Totally, dude. Yeah. But that's the separator. It's discipline. That's what Tom Brady said. He says a lot of guys can get up 1 or 2 days a week and be on time, hit the gym, hit the training. Can do that for a week? Who can do that for a month? Who can do that for 6 months? Who can do that for a year? Who can do that for a decade?
Yeah.
And so one day, Tom Brady woke up at like 34, 35. He's like, you know what? I think I'm going to play another 10 years. And he made the decision to play another 10 years.
Yeah.
And he did whatever it took to play for 10 years. And obviously we know Tom Brady looks great shape, and he does all kinds of biohacking, a bunch of cool stuff. So yeah, man. So this guy gets bribed, of course, doesn't get the 50 grand, dies. What happens next?
So they used that guy's testimony to open the case a third time. And they brought in a prosecutor who has actually been disbarred at this point. I mean, about a decade and a half later, he ended up getting disbarred for malpractice, or I don't think that's the right legal term, but for basically not practicing the right order of law and like breaking the rules inside my dad's case. It was like two main cases that got him disbarred. It was my dad's and one other one that he just was pretty gnarly, ruthless guy. Obviously had zero care for what the truth was just really like essentially wanted to paint my dad as a terrible human being to the jury. So that trial process went on for about 5 years. And it was a battle for my family for literally 5 years. We were like fighting this case, and my dad he had created some success. And so he also was the nutritionist for the Phoenix Suns at the time, and trained a bunch of, Charles Barkley and Dan Worley and a bunch of those guys that were well known. So he was had like a profile, and he also had a profile that people, I guess, liked the story of. Like, he was this like grew up, nice Christian guy who like became wealthy and then potentially killed his wife. Like, that was the storyline, right? And so people loved it, and it became kind of a buzz thing. And so like we had literally like news cameras, and like news vans would be like waiting outside our house, and like places we would go, like trying to like film us and like get statements. And so that was actually when we moved. I grew up like in Gilbert, like for my first few years of life, and then we ended up moving to this small town literally to like get away from all
the paparazzi.
Paparazzi.
The paparazzi's real, people.
Yeah.
So don't tell too good of a story, okay? They might be coming back for you. No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, I won't speak about it on like that, like freaking Dateline type crap. But anyway, so that was what was going on for us, and that went on for about 5 years, and then essentially my dad ended up getting convicted of manslaughter, which essentially meaning that he didn't do enough to save my mom. There was like a 10-minute window when he found my mom. There was a doctor that lived up the street, and he called the doctor, and then was like trying to resuscitate my mom, and then like 10 minutes later called 911. And they essentially argued like, if he would have called 911 first, then maybe they could have saved her life. It really was more of like a cover up for them to just be like literally two of the jurors after an interview said, well, I didn't really think he was guilty. I just don't like the guy. Like they just painted my dad as this like terrible, like wealthy, like arrogant.
What's your dad's personality?
There was over 100 individuals who wrote letters. Like, so when you go through the actual prosecution, after you get judged as guilty or innocent, then there's the sentencing where the judge decides, okay, what's the actual punishment going to be? You know, and I think for manslaughter, it can be like from probation up to 12 years, or I could be off on those numbers, but something like that. So the judge decided actually what the sentence was. Well, people can write personal letters on behalf of the accused person. And there was over 100 people from our community who wrote handwritten letters to the judge, and they ended up having to like extend out the sentencing so she could read all of the letters, because there were like pages and pages of letters like that people would write like individually, pages about just the impact my dad had on the community, what a like incredible human he was. Like anyone who knows my dad personally like knows the type of guy he is. I mean, he's he's still to this day one of the most impactful people like currently day to day in my life. Like he's really incredible human.
Resilient.
Reminds
me of you ever seen the movie or the book The Count
of Monte Cristo? Yeah, we love that movie.
Is that your guys' movie night? You guys bust out the popcorn, the ice cream. We're like, all right, let's rewind.
That's our movie. Except for my dad is like immensely against like the idea of revenge. Like he like in all those things that happen, he's never like, he doesn't even let us talk negatively about those family members and stuff. That like if it gets brought up, he just shuts down the conversation. He's like, it's not like we will, like he basically just says we'll prove him wrong by winning. That's it. We'll just live our life. I love that. Yeah. We'll
prove them wrong by winning.
Yeah.
Has your dad written a book yet?
He's not allowed to write a book about it, because that was a part of like when you get, there's some sort of like structure around the way that his prosecution happened where like legally he's not allowed to profit by it or something. So he could write a book. He would just have to like not sell it or something like that. So I don't know, maybe I'll write a book and write about his story and also my.
You're telling me Jordan Belfort right now?
Yeah.
What about Jordan Belfort?
It was just a part of their prosecution specifically. I think like it doesn't happen in every case, but it was the way it happened anyway.
Fair enough. Okay, so a lot of people liked your dad. They sent these letters in, and the judge had to figure out what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting, because I would assumed if it's, whatever, probation 12 years, 10. So he got sentenced to how many, and how much did he serve?
5 years, and served like, I think 4.5. Arizona has one of the longest you have to serve percentages in the U.S. I think actually the longest. But
wow.
Yeah.
That's insane, man. And can you take me back to, if you don't mind, I know this is, and dude, I love it, dude. I love how honest and vulnerable you are. I just want to appreciate that. And that was one of the things I learned at the event, is that like vulnerability and sharing how we truly are experiencing the world around us is not weakness.
Oh, yeah.
I always thought that for different reasons, but I would love for you to take me back to the moment. It's probably a sad moment. That you finally realized that all this craziness that you never thought would happen, had faith in God, was like your world just turned upside down.
Yeah, no, I've relived that moment a few times, trying to like just, I don't know, understand it. And so one thing that's interesting, when this all started, my dad sat our family down and he said like, everything's going to be okay. And I remember us sitting as a family. We were sitting on the ground. We were actually in my aunt's house when this all like started, and having that conversation. And for me, I believed my dad like explicitly. So when he said that to me, it was like the whole time we were going through the court process, like other people were like, Braven, like you got to realize that your dad's probably not going to like he might go to prison. Like, and I just was like, absolutely not. And so actually at the day of sentencing, as a kid, you're not allowed to speak in court until you're 18. And so I never was able to speak or anything, but this was the first time that I got to the immediate family were able to make a statement to the judge. And so at 10 years old, I got to go in front of the entire courtroom and speak directly to the judge, which was actually a really insane experience. The judge ended up crying and calling for a recess, because obviously the judge is not supposed to cry like and be emotionally like triggered by the situation, but she ends up crying, and then the prosecutor like freaked out, and it was like this whole thing. But yeah, it was, so in my head, even in that moment as I was speaking, it was like, you're not going to like take my dad away. Like my mom's already gone. Like, don't take my dad away. And I still believed like he was just going to get probation and we were going to be fine. But then when the judge came back and said 5 years, to me, that was like the worst news. But to my family, they actually were expecting it to be like 10 or 12. And so everyone was excited and like, not excited, like that's probably the wrong word, but in a little bit of a way relieved that it was only 5. And that to me felt like a punch in the face as a kid. Like, no, like that means my dad's gonna be gone for 5 years. Like, and so I kind of freaked out and yelled, and then my pop actually kind of like, not like drug, but like grabbed me and pulled me out of the courtroom. But it was, it was an awful experience, dude. Like, especially, I think that experience was the part that was worse to me, that people were almost like, Braven, we need to be happy with that. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, that's the worst case scenario in my mind. So, it was a rough experience. It also just sucked to feel like so helpless. So like, I couldn't even speak. That was the first time I got to speak, but even like in that moment, I like yelled out and was basically like, I don't know, like last ditch effort as a kid, trying to be like, no, you know,
we're not fucking leaving.
Yes.
Braven was the first one to do that.
Yes. And yeah, man, it sucked. It sucked.
Yeah, that's not fun, dude. Well, dude, I want to hear, like, can you still, like, because I know sometimes when we have like trauma, emotion, the memories start to blur. Is it blurred, or can you still see it very vividly, everything?
That day at sentencing is extremely vivid for me. I don't know why. Like, a lot of that whole experience is pretty blurred for me, and like, I don't have certain things I just totally don't remember at all. But that moment, I remember standing in this like the courtroom like divided into 2, and like all the other family and stuff who was kind of like prosecuting us was sitting on that side, and my whole like family and friends and people who kind of like were loyal to us and who we were and knew my dad, they were on this side. And so I remember like that moment. It's weird. It like drives me actually pretty intensely. The picture that is in my mind of that moment, and maybe I've created it over time. You know, like Dr. Ben Hardy says, like the past is actually created by the present. We say the present's created by the past, but he's like, no, it's actually more accurate that the past is created by the present, because your present self is creating the imagery of the past. So I may have conjured this up. Like, this might not even be real. The experience and the placement is real, but like what was going on, like I totally read into it, whatever. I don't know. But I remember being there and standing there and looking over to the other side, and one of my aunts specifically making this smirk like we just won. And like, there's this like emotion attached to that for me that is like, I will like show you what winning is. Like, not I'm gonna destroy you. In that moment, I did feel like I want to kill them. Like, to be 100%, I was like, I want to like just like
destroy the world.
Like, everyone. I hate everyone. I hate everything. But as that's kind of like, as I've like learned to process that emotion a little bit, it's very like, you're going to see me winning in this world. You'll be undeniable. And you'll have people ask you like, oh, are you related to that kid? Don't you know that kid? Like, oh, like Braven, like, isn't that like your nephew or something? Or isn't that your, you know, whatever.
And then they're going to be pissed off.
Yeah. Or I don't know.
Or whatever their emotion is. Yeah.
I'm going to be like, we actually won. Like,
dude, good for you, man.
Our life. And
that's one of my favorite sayings, because I've been through a lot of pain as well, man. So that's why I can relate and sit with you in some of these pockets of pain, is I believe that the pain that you experience in life will either create the man that God called you to be, or it will spiral you into the pits of hell of who Satan wants you to be. And so it sounds like at first Satan was ready to grab you by the hair and frickin' start running you all over, destroying shit. What did you do next as a 10-year-old boy, and your dad's now?
I mean, how did I get out of that? Like, the proof of what I'm creating with my life is the evidence of my dad and who he actually is, because it's who he raised. And so, when that first happened, I mean, I was like just this little rage monster. And for about 6 months, I wasn't able to like see or speak to my dad at all, because technically I was the victim of what he had just been convicted of, because it was my mom that died.
Do you have any other siblings?
Yeah, I have. I have two older brothers and a little sister. But then my mom, who died, she had 2 kids as well. But they kind of went with the other family, and they believed my dad killed my mom. Yeah, or killed it. Yeah. So they're not really. They're my half siblings, but I haven't talked to them since I was like 8 or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother part of the
story. That divided your family for sure, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah, for 6 months, I couldn't see or talk to my dad even on the phone. It was like illegal. Like, it was literally illegal for that to happen. Even like my mom could call. So my dad had gotten remarried to Hillary, who, you know, I call her mom because she literally like raised me my whole life. She's an amazing woman.
That's awesome.
I have 2 amazing moms. And anyway, so for 6 months, couldn't talk to him, couldn't go see him, couldn't anything. And for those 6 months, I was like a miserable child. Like, I was terrible in school. It was like, it was just a bad thing. Like, and I just was pissed off at the world. But then once we were able to figure out all the legal stuff to be able to get us to be able to go and visit my dad, like, that shifted a lot. And I mean, we visited my dad every Saturday and every Sunday for 5 years. It was a 2-hour drive there, 2-hour drive back. And we would drive there Saturday, spend 8 hours together as a family in this like cafeteria visiting room, and then 2 hours back. And then the next day, 2 hours, 8 hours of visiting and 2 hours back. So imagine literally a table in a much less nice area, but in this prison, a table like this with my family sitting around it for 8 hours, no phones, no TVs, no anything. There's like some playing cards, some scriptures, and like some scratch paper with pencils, and sitting there for 16 hours a week at a table like that talking. And that's like was the development of my life from 10 to 15. Plus then another 8 hours in the car with everyone but my dad. So, you know, I got my permit. I was like, that was me learning to drive, was those drives. Like, but yeah, we spent an immense amount of time together, and my dad would always have one-on-ones with us. He called them Weekly with Fathers. We liked the WWE growing up. So it was WWFs, like Weekly with Father, which was just a meeting about our goals, how we were doing in life, where we're at. You know, he would tell me about girls and how to control my sexual desires and like try and like hone that in and all those things. Like that all happened like in a prison. From 10 to 15. So, and that I think is what shifted it from what you said of something that was going to break me and turn me into a awful rebellious. I mean, how many kids, like the statistic for kids whose fathers go to prison, especially like for like a crime like that, not like a white collar, it wasn't like tax evasion. It was a state prison. Like the number of kids who make it out of that experience without going to jail or prison themselves is like the statistics like very low. So the difference was like literally how he showed up and led our family and said, no, we're not going to be bitter. Like, we're not going to complain. We're not going to have a pity party. Like, he showed up every week to those family visits, like with lessons prepared. And we were reading books together as a family and like all of this stuff. Like, he just kept us somehow believing that it was going to work out.
Man, that's good.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that. So it sounds like you had a period where you it was the desert. You couldn't hear anything from your father. But then when you started to experience it and see that your dad was still showing up for you, what was the biggest lesson you learned showing up every week over the weekend in that 8 hours, right? No distractions. Because I'm sure one of the things that, I'm sure you've heard in the space is that life is happening for us and not to us, right? Everyone says it. It's so true though, isn't it?
It is.
And there's scripture backed by it. One of my favorite scriptures is Jeremiah 29:11. Right? Did you ever memorize Bible verses or do anything?
Yeah. When I started a mission, we memorized a ton of scripture. So anyway, but yeah.
So what was the biggest lesson you learned though? Through sitting there and not having distractions and learning. Was it learning to be present? Like, what would you say is like looking back? You're like, man, I'm so grateful that even though that bad happened, here's the good that came from it.
I mean, there's a million lessons inside of it, but now being a father myself and we're about to have our second son. To me, the overarching lesson was just that like my dad did not put his pain and his struggle on us. He did not make it ours. And I see a lot of other parents do that, where they're going through struggles and they're going through hardships and they put it on their children, even if indirectly. And I'm not even saying like you can't share like your troubles with your kids. Like maybe my dad was even a little over the top of like not letting us see that it was hard for him. But that's, I believe, like the role of a father in a family is to lead and to show certainty and to create security. And even from prison, even with our business, his business failing, losing our homes, having to move in my grandparents' home, losing all of our vehicles, everything we had, basically, he still was showing up as like the masculine certainty in our lives for our entire family. And I can only imagine, I don't know, I've never even asked him this, I should ask him, like, I'm sure there was massive uncertainty behind the scenes for him, and fear and anxiety and stress and overwhelm. And inside, we were actually still fighting a lawsuit that was coming. So we had run out of money. We were like $2 million in debt from lawyers of the legal case. So the civil case, he had to defend himself, which is a whole nother part, but he ended up winning that, which is crazy, by himself, defending himself. And going through all of that, and his wife being out raising the kids, having to now like take over a business that she never like ran or even been involved in, and and it basically like falling apart, and like it basically failed, but we had amazing people who like held us up and helped us get through that time. And my mom just like fought tooth and nail for it. And for him to just have certainty through all of that and to show up for our family every single week, it's like you said, Tom Brady, like he literally was like Tom Brady dad, like every single week, every day on the phone. Like when I'd be playing basketball games and stuff, like he would be on the phone with my mom, like having her talk through the plays, like commentate the game to her.
No way.
And like, yeah, it's like he was so involved.
Wow.
In such a difficult circumstance that it just spoke to me of like who he is and like his love for us as kids and how he believed in us. And I mean, we literally created the business plan for my current business from inside the prison. So yeah, it's crazy.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah.
Wow. So part of what I love to talk about on this podcast, Bridging the Gap, is the lessons we've learned and who we've developed into as a result of looking at that gap, looking at how scary that obstacle, that challenge, that setback, that adversity is, and be like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to do it anyways, and I'm going to build that bridge. And I'm going to overcome these challenges. I'm going to get to the other side. I'm not going to let the bitterness sit in. So for you, 9 years old, your father's going away to prison. That version of your father, how old was he at that time? Did you say
40? Yeah,
40.
I honestly don't know exactly.
That's
right.
okay.
I think like 40.
Around 40.
Yeah.
So around 40, and then coming out of that 5 years later, who was the man that came out?
Man, it was crazy when he got home. It was like it felt like he had never been gone. Like especially we spent so much time together, still like in involvement together, even though he was gone like all the whole time. But we were right back into things, and he just went to work, dude. Like he literally, like we were millions of dollars in debt. We had a business that was failing and basically like not doing revenue, like, and we were living in my grandparents' home and his parents' home, and he just went to work and said like, we're gonna get out of this. And he's built back his company to be bigger than it's ever been, gotten it completely out of debt, paid every single person who's ever given us a dime or Christmas presents or anything for our family during that time, paid him back. And just like, that's it. Like he just literally was like what he's always said, like, we're just going to live and that will show them like who we are.
Dude, that gave me chills, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, this is a big ask. Does your dad live around here?
Yeah. I mean, he lives in like the town that I come from. Yeah.
Okay. I think we should have you and your father part 2, but
that'd be epic.
The audience has to vote. Okay, guys, comment down below if you want to see Douglas, right?
Yep.
Douglas Grant, right?
Yep.
On the podcast with Braven. Okay, comment down below, send me a DM, and I'll see if I can convince him, because this sounds like a guy that you'd want to hear his story from him on Bridging the Gap. Because I bet you there's some stories you haven't even shared.
Yeah, that would be epic. I mean, getting his insight from me sharing what I've shared, that would be epic. So
I would love to do a part 2. So, okay, so he comes out and he's just like ready to go. His engine's revved up. He comes out, and like, what was his like? Because I believe that first impressions are important, right? Like you were coming over, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make sure my place is like as clean as I'm not the most, but I'm going to have the cleaner over. I'm going to do these. So like when he came back, how did he show up for you guys? And I know you said it never felt like he left because you guys had been in constant communication, but was there any sort of different way and he was showing up? That chip on his shoulder, was he more fired up? Was he more motivated? Or did he not skip a beat and he was just the same person, just felt like he pulled out of the matrix for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, he came home and worked like insanely hard, but also to ensure that he could be at every single event. Like I think he felt like he missed out on so much during that time, like sports events and games and things like that. So he's never once missed a single sporting event of mine. When I spoke at Funnel Hacking Live, he flew out there for that day just to watch me speak. Like he's wants to be as involved as possible. So for him, it was like, yeah, he needed to work hard because we were like under a mountain of debt, but it was never at the expense of like our family, what we needed. And I mean, we all worked in the business too. Like there was no really employees left. It was just literally our family, like holding it together. And I was like bottling and cleaning the place on the weekend. And like, it was like this crazy experience, like for our family to just be like us against the world is really how it felt.
Wow. Did that bring you guys closer together?
Yeah, no. Like one of the biggest challenges like early in my marriage was how close my family is. I mean, imagine spending 16 hours sitting at a table talking with your family for 5 years. Like how much time do you think the average family spends? No phone, no technology, no distraction, talking to each other.
Right.
Like maybe like most families, it's like the average in America, maybe it's less than like 2 hours a week. I don't know. Like
2-3 hours. Yeah. 4
like
hours
even if
max.
they're doing family dinner night. It's
5
like,
hours.
Yeah. It's 5 hours. So they're doing it every day. It's like, and they're still to have no phones. No, it's like crazy to have that much time. And so we're extremely close. Plus, especially when you're going through legal battles. And I mean, we fought legal battles because then the civil suit opened and from basically the time I was 5 years old until when I was 21, we finally like settled the last like settlement of all that stuff. And so literally for the mass majority of my life, we were literally in just like direct legal battles, going to court, like going through all that. So like there was very much a feeling of like the world is against us and we are like fighting them. And not the world is in God, because my dad was like, God is always for us. And even to this day, if you ask him about it, we'll tell you why that experience and that whole thing was actually for us and for our family and for like, and I mean, there's a lot of, it is good. Like, I mean, we spend 16 hours a week together. What family gets to do that? So
seriously,
like, I mean, it did suck, but like,
well, of course,
there was amazing things to come out of it. And that's been his attitude about it is we're just going to do us and make the most of what we've been blessed with.
I love it, dude. So to wrap up that story, because I want to ask you a couple about other things, business related. I know you got a beautiful wife, a child. I want to talk about that because there's really, for me, there's 4 B's, right, for bridging the gap. Every man, I think, needs to master the 4 B's. Number 1, they need to master Bible knowledge. Like if you don't understand God's word, who was, who is to come, bro, you're lost. You're gonna there's a God-sized hole in your heart. So after you master that, I think you need to master your body, because if you don't have your body, you can't show up for your family. You can't show up at work. You can't do those things. Yeah, you can't read, literally, you can't read the Bible. I had Lyme disease. I had Lyme in the brain at one point.
Wow.
And I was trying to read, I literally was trying to read Proverbs, trying to read it. The words wouldn't register. Yeah. It was so just overtaken. So 100%. And then from there, business, right? Because you can't provide for a woman and a family until you've mastered business. And business is the ability to produce revenue, produce income, right? And a lot of people have said this before me, but you are a business. You watching this are a business. Yeah. How you use your time is a business. The time you have in the day is a business. Yeah. So I want to get into some of that stuff. And then the last final B that I want to touch on to wrap up would be your bae, right? That's the final B. So who's your bae? Yeah. Who's your babies, right? That's 5. I don't have a baby yet, but eventually I'll start talking about babies on the podcast. But is there anything else though to wrap up this story? Because it's such a powerful story, and I want to just acknowledge you for showing just vulnerability today.
No, I mean that's the story of it. I think like the thing that I would just share is that it's incredible where you can get in a decade. I know Tony Robbins says that. We overestimate what we can do in a year, underestimate. It's been a decade since I got out of prison, and it is insane how different our lives is. In fact, I was on a call with a friend of mine's mom, who, this is like less than a year ago, I had essentially influenced my friend to quit nursing school. Okay. And my friend's mom said to me on the phone, she called me after, upset at me that I in some way influenced him to quit nursing school. And she says, Braven, my son has not had the legs up in life you've had. And I literally like was talking to my wife about it after and was like literally crying out of like literal joy that someone could view my life as like, my kids haven't been as blessed and lucky as you are. And it's like, how incredible is that? When literally 10 years ago, my dad was in prison. We'd lost our home. We'd lost everything. We had no like money really coming in other than like literally like covering the bare essentials. And my mom passed away and like all of these things. And then someone would be like, man, my kids haven't been as lucky as you. I'm like, it's damn right. Like I got the baddest dad in the world. So like they weren't as lucky, I guess. But, yeah.
That's winning.
Yeah, it is winning.
Dude, that's awesome, man. So if you're in debt right now, you're going through some shit, okay? $2 million, right?
Yeah, $2 million
in debt, living at his grandparents' house. His dad comes back, and I mean, he might have been internally. We'll have to ask him. But internally, did you feel or sense any sort of like doubt, uncertainty? Was he angry all the time, pissed off, frustrated?
No.
What? Who is this guy?
No, like I said, like I'm sure he was angry internally.
Yeah.
But he didn't let us fall to that. Like he didn't want that to be the way we were showing up. It was more out of like, we are going to show up and win because it's who we are, not because of like this anger towards them. Like maybe for me, it is a little more out of like anger. I'm like, I want to prove them wrong. But to him, it was like, no, it just is who we are. We'll never not be it.
Yeah.
So they can do anything they want, but we'll never stop being who we are. And it's more steady. It's more solid. It's like Tom Brady. I doubt every day he woke up like gassed up out of his mind to go like work out. It was just steady and just consistent and like just solid. Like that's the word I would use for it. So yeah.
You built your dad helped you build your business plan for the company you have now, which is awesome because I remember when I saw you speak of funnel hacking, I think was it you just hit the 2 Comma Club?
Yeah, I think we had just done $1 million, like hit our first $1 million, like a few months before Funnel Hacking Live 2021. So
Let's go. So just hit and now you've crossed the 2 Comma Club X?
Yeah, in 8 figures.
In 2 years, dude.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. And is that your run rate or is that just total revenue?
Current run rate's about 8 figures, yeah.
Wow.
So
that's awesome, man. And so tell me real quick, what was the plan that you guys built when your dad was in prison?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed so much, dude.
Okay.
Like, I say that, like, it was the business plan. Like, we had started, it was actually going to be based on an enzyme product because my dad's really good with enzymes. It's like one of the things he's an expert at. And so it was called lactoglutenzyme. It was like the worst name in the history, but it was like lactose gluten enzyme because it breaks down lactose and gluten. Like if people have sensitivities, whatever.
Right.
We actually still have that product. It's called Athlete Digestive Formula.
Yeah, I've seen it,
powerful product. Like
really,
yeah, for a lot of reasons, but incredible digestive enzyme, probiotic, gut health. Like, anyways, that's like my dad's bread and butter. So that was what the company was gonna be built on. When we actually ended up, it never really took off. Like I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So it was like we built a website and like tried to get it going, but it never really took off. And then in 2016, I really had fallen in love with like the fitness world and market. We were going to like, me and my brothers were going to like the expos, and my dad had taken us to like the Mr. Olympia Expo and all this stuff. And like really, I kind of was just like, I just want to be here. Like I want to be a part of this. And so I was like, what if we just sold the raw ingredients that my dad was using to manufacture, like directly to bodybuilders and stuff? Because me and my brother and our friends, like we would get like tubs of the stuff that my dad had for like manufacturing, and we would just like make these gnarly shakes with like 20 grams of creatine and like 20 grams of like tribulus terrestris or like testosterone, like just obnoxious, like way over the top amounts of everything.
Okay.
And we're like, maybe other people would like this. Like this would be cool. So that was the idea. Gains in bulk, where it came from, was like we were selling these gains like in bulk directly to consumers. And so, and that kind of like morphed the idea a little bit. And then I met a guy, Dean, who had created the process for instantized creatine, which was our flagship, like #1 product. Really powerful process he invented to increase the solubility and absorbability of creatine monohydrate and get rid of all the like chalkiness, the bloating, all that. And so we actually ended up really launching in 2016 with that product. We went to the Arnold Classic. Me and a couple of my friends literally like drove all the way out there from Arizona to Ohio. And anyways, whole crazy story. But we took 1,000 bags of this creatine and sold every single bag, like literally 1-to-1, just like talking to people that weekend, sold them. and it was crazy. And I was like, okay,
1,000 bags.
Yeah, 1,000 bags.
That's what were you selling them back then?
Oh, dude.
$15, $20?
Yeah,
$10?
like $30, like super cheap. Like this is 2016 and the market.
What was your pitch? Give it to me. 30 seconds. Walk up.
So we literally have, like, if you've seen any of our ads, like it's literally the ads today.
It's like tested the ads in person.
Like normal micronized creatine in a glass bottle and in a glass jar, and then our creatine in the glass next to it. And it would literally like show people it mixing up, show ours completely dissolving, talk through it, and be like, you know, the normal creatine, it's hard to break down. That's what's sitting in your gut, causing the bloating, causing the excess water retention. That's what makes you look puffy. Ours, like, as you can literally physically see with your eyes, that's why the pitch is so good, because not only does it work when someone starts taking it, before they take it, they can literally see the difference, and it gets rid of it, and they can see it literally right there for their eyes, and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, when I take creatine, it's sitting at the bottom of the glass, it's chalky, it's gritty, like I feel bloated, perfect. And like, here's ours, and you can literally physically see the difference. So that was really the pitch, and it was like, you know, this is brand new to the market, and you can get a bag right now. You know?
And when did you first start selling these 1,000 bags in person? Was it 2020?
That was 2016.
Oh, 2016.
So this is a long time ago. We started this company.
Okay.
But it never really like fully took off. I mean, I was like still like really a kid at the time. I was like 17. So we built the company up a little bit, but never really, like, no one was ever really making money from it or like getting paid. It was more like, for a little bit, we went to like 7 shows a year, like expos. And I would say it was more of like a hobby for like me and my brother, and like, you know, my dad doing it with us to like, I don't know, just we wanted to be in the industry. I ended up going and serving a mission, a church mission, teaching people about Jesus Christ, kind of in there. And my dad ended up buying like Iron Man magazine and like some other stuff. And so like that company just like, no one really did anything with it. It just kind of sat there and like kind of like fizzled. And then when I got home from that mission, I was playing college basketball, got married, and was like, I need to figure out how to make money. And so I was like, I need to figure out how to make this thing work, actually, like legit. I think we have the best product in the world, but we got to figure out how to actually like make it a real business. And then, you know, that's when I started reading, getting mentors. Caleb, one of my best friends growing up, came in and like started learning Facebook ads and that side of things. And, you know, then that's when I would say it really started. So that was kind of like 2020. So we kind of really started in 2016, but I almost view the company like it started twice. Like we started it, didn't really end up like working out, almost failed. And then we started again in 2020. We were actually going to shut it down, and it was kind of like, we either figure it out or we're going to have to like shut it down and move on to something else. But yeah, we figured it out.
I love it. Who does Braven look up to the most in business?
Russell Brunson. And I know a lot of people might say that because he's like this big marketer or whatever, but I've built a pretty cool relationship with Russell Brunson, and he is one of the most unique people I've met in the space. I've had dinners with billionaires, people who are doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and I've never met someone as truly humble and I don't know, just committed to serving like the world, and like who feels so purpose driven behind what he's doing as Russell Brunson. Like it's interesting. Like the more time I spend with him, the more impressed I am versus most people that you see online. Like the more time you spend with them, the less impressed you are with them. Yeah. I've literally had dinner at his house and had his wife cooked a meal for us. Like it was just, I met his kids. I've trained both of his sons in the gym, and like it's incredible to see not just what he's done with business to build $1 billion company and the way he's done it, but also like the man he's maintained and stayed even through going from like basically nothing to $1 billion company in less than 10 years, which is insane.
I love that, dude. And yeah, one of the things that I because I know Russell too. I'm not probably as close to him as you, but I am pretty close to his son, and we developed a cool relationship, and he's a great kid. Yeah. But yeah, the Brunson family is a powerhouse. They've got some serious potential, and I just love also, that's one of the things that I personally have seen from Russell is like, yeah, he's built the billions of companies, he's done the stuff, but like who he is at home for his kids is awesome. Like it's hard to do both. Like I've seen people work 80, 90, 100 hours, but then their kids are off doing whatever. They're not present, but he's able to be present and do what he does. Why, from your experience, what's the number one lesson you've taken from being so close to someone like that that's gone on to help make the impact that you've made in your business?
It's just non-negotiable for him. Like he doesn't take opportunities over his family. Like I've literally watched him say no to things. To get him to travel and leave Boise is pretty hard if it's not with his family. Like if you want him to just come be on your podcast or come speak at an event, like it's hard to get him to do it because he's like, it's a non-negotiable for him. I've watched him do it and say no and like be committed to his family. And even when he's having to grind and work extremely hard, one of the days I was in Boise a couple months ago for an event and was up there working with them in his office, and he had a bunch of stuff to do, and he went home and had dinner at like 5:30. It was like 5:30 to 6. Had dinner with the family, spent some time with his kids. We had like a family home evening activity thing that like with his family, and then he went back to the office at like 11 at night and worked till like 3 a.m. And I was like, that's stuff I was doing when I was like 20 and like trying to like grind and make it happen. But he is doing that today because it's like, he's not going to sacrifice his family for the business. And so he basically like sacrificed himself for it, for his family to be able to get both in. And so he's still doing both, but not sacrificing, one or the other. So,
wow. How does he do it?
Man, that's a good question. Yeah, you have to ask him. I don't know, man. Like it's insane. Like the level of energy he has. I mean, he takes a lot of our supplements. So. Little plug, but no, he
Russell endorsed.
Yeah. Anyway, no, I think he's been doing it a long time too. Like I think it's like the Tom Brady thing. Like I don't think he was that way, and I've even actually asked him that question. Like, how different are you now than when you started? And I think it surprised me how humble he was about like how he was at the beginning. And if you've even seen videos, like he was like a terrible speaker, terrible on camera. Like he's just grinded out. Like it wasn't pure talent or those things. Like he's just been consistent for a couple decades.
I love that, man. And what would you say like brings you the most joy in business? Because you've already hit, dude, you're already making millions. Like what keeps you going? What's your next level? What is bridging the gap beyond what you've already done look like?
That's such a good question. I had a friend literally this morning text me and say, Braven, does money buy happiness? And it was such an interesting question because it was just like, that was it. That was like the whole text. But in response to him saying, does money buy happiness? My answer is essentially no, but it can remove a lot of problems. But to me, what does buy happiness is progress and growth. Like I think that's God's plan for happiness is eternal progress. Like it's literally the scriptural like definition of like the eternities is like eternal progression, meaning like also interchangeable for eternal joy. So to me, it's all about progression. And so I think money is just like such a measurable version of progression that it's harder to measure. Like, is my marriage progressing? It's in some of those things. So I do find a lot of joy in not just my money growing, but like the business growing, like the results, the team, watching like team members like leveling up in their lives and being able to move into nicer like homes and apartments and like things like that. Like that growth is the thing that brings me the most joy beyond like the milestones and like the money hits. Like the dopamine hit of those things is like, it's very short lived. Like, as much as I was like, oh my gosh, when we do, when we cross the 8-figure mark, it'll feel like I'm Hercules. It was like for like 15 minutes. And then you're like, oh, all right, we got to
wait, there's 9 figures now?
Yeah. You get into bigger rooms and it just grows. But the progression is the joy.
The stairs never end, right? Until we get to heaven, right? So that's cool, man. Well, to kind of wrap up the podcast, I always like to kind of ask a couple questions at the end. Like, and one of the most powerful ones, we already kind of went over it, but go back to that 9-year-old version of yourself, right? He's about to go into that 5 years where his dad's not present. All the things you've learned now, you could only give him one actionable tool, like a little tool that you either do, a routine, a habit, something that you've learned now that's a part of your day-to-day routine that you'd give to him to help him grow even faster through that experience. What would you give him and why?
Man. So it's probably an awkward pause on the podcast, but I'm really trying to think about that.
It's going to be a good one.
Man, I'm trying to think something that's actionable, not just like
mindset.
Like stay the course. Like it's all going to work out. Like, even though I do think that's what I would say to him, I think I would just give him a hug and be like, it's going to work out. But, I think that the tool that I would give him is honestly the thing that comes to my mind is prayer. And I prayed a lot as a kid, but I would just like tell him like, just every day. And more, I would say, as I've gotten older, prayers become more like visualization. And it's like almost this blend of the self-development world and that side of things that I've learned and love and like prayer. And it's like me visualizing with God and visualizing and praying from gratitude. That's the tool that I think that I was probably missing as a kid was in the moment, I wasn't able to have the gratitude for it that I now have. And I think it would have changed my experience more had I been able to like find gratitude in the very moment of that pain. And that's a practice that today is like extremely valuable for me. And maybe it seems easier now because my life like on the outside looks pretty cool or whatever. But there's daily stuff that sucks. Like you make a bigger company and more money, like there's bigger problems to deal with, and it's easy to get wrapped up into them and start getting lost. But the gratitude and to be like, you know, I often say to myself, like when I'm dealing with like having to fire an employee or have a hard conversation, I'm like, dude, how lucky am I that at 25 I get to have these conversations? How lucky am I that I get to be learning the experience of having to like let an employee go or hire people or have these hard conversations at 25? Most guys that are even business owners don't get to start having those conversations until they're 45. They're not gonna. I'm gonna have the experience lapse on most of those guys. So just to like, it reframes everything to have gratitude, and I feel like that sounds so cliche, but like genuinely doing it is a powerful weapon in life.
I love that, and that's the mindset side of things. As you start to develop as a man, you develop the mindset, and you're like, what am I gonna do with this mind? What am I gonna do with these gifts, these abilities, these things that God has given me? If you were to go back to the 2016-year-old version of you, right? He's handing out those protein bags. Now you've already built the company you wanted to build. What's the skip button for that dude at 18? For someone watching to be like, in 2 minutes or less, how do I build a multiple six-figure income doing something I love?
Directly tactical, I would say make a better offer. Like offer is so pivotal, especially in the early days. That was like what took us years to get to $1 million, took us to $1 million in like a couple months. Just, I would say, was like basically offer.
What was the change in the offer?
When we were trying to sell online, we were just trying to sell the product as like a product.
Okay. And
when we shifted the offer to, you know, like the offer, like all the pieces and providing more value than just the item, right? It was like we added, like, I know these are gimmicky things maybe, but like adding the shaker bottle and the little funnel and the gift card, like we built an actual offer physically, but then actually the way we offered it, what's the story? What's the story behind what we're selling? So like offer is more than just the stuff and the components, but also the way you speak about it. So that's like tactically what I would say is like directly is like offer. But really, if I was talking to that kid at 2016, I'd be like, go find a mentor right now.
Okay.
Like pay someone to learn. Because once I actually got mentors who had done what I wanted to do, we started moving 10 times faster. And in the early stages, it's fine. It's easy to find good mentors that don't cost crazy amounts of money. It's hard once you at the 8-figure mark to find someone who's been farther than you and is willing to teach you because they're not doing it themselves. It's hard. Like it's hard to find those kind of mentors. So anyway.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna have to look in different places, right?
Yeah, they're more expensive. They're harder. Like their time is. They're usually, if they are coaching, it's like group stuff. Like it's hard to get someone who's like really gonna invest in you. And a lot of times it's more relationship driven, I would say at this point. So, but
yeah, and I do agree with the relationship driven. Like if you're young right now, like relatively young, if you're under like let's say 26, you have a competitive edge because I don't know what it is, but it's just that primal, tribal thing in us where it's like let's turn back and let's give back to the younger guy.
Yep.
But like if you're 45, like I'm sorry, if you're watching this podcast, no one's giving you handouts, dude. You're the one that's supposed to be helping the guys, and you're asking. It's like get your crap together.
And that's how you have to view it when you're young, because it's 100%. Easy to say, oh my gosh, no one wants to do business with me, no one wants to work with me, no one wants to work for me because I'm young. I struggle with that so much. I still struggle with that somewhat. But you actually have to view it as your greatest asset,
100%,
because it is this huge asset that people are voting for you. They want you to win. As you get older, even like going from 21 doing this, or like doing it at 17 to doing it at 25, people like don't vote for me to win as much. Like they're already, it's like, oh, like, once you start getting a little bit older and start winning more and more, people stop being so much your advocate and more, I don't know, get jealous or like want you to lose. So dude, capitalize on the young vibes and like see it as an asset and a weapon.
Young guys don't have another 10 years to just blow their 20s.
Yeah, it's a waste.
It's a waste. You can. You're going to be so much further ahead than guys like me and Braven and Caleb sitting here who are busting our butt. We're going to be just cruising. Yeah. Right?
The lessons themselves that I'll have at 30.
Yeah. From doing.
it's insane. Like everything could fall apart today and fail.
Yep.
And just the lessons I've gained are worth millions and millions of dollars, and I know where I would be back to faster than I ever got here. So anyway.
I love it. Well, dude, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, man. I think this is a massive success. I know that if you're watching this right now and you got some value from the podcast, make sure you subscribe and you let us know who you want to see on the podcast next. Make sure that if you want to connect with Braven, you want to do a little plug for your stuff?
Yeah, just follow me on Instagram. I'm super active on Instagram, Braven Grant. Follow me there. Check out our website, gainsinbulk.com. You get some creatine, get some gains. Anyways. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, listen, if you enjoyed this episode, then the podcast is completely free. All I ask is that you share it with someone, and that is the price for watching the show, okay? Because I'm bringing you literally world-class guests. This is an 8-figure guy, 26 years old. We're bringing in savages that can teach you the skills, the tactics, the strategies to bridge the gap. So I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll leave you guys with this. 1 Timothy 4:12. It says, do not be discouraged because of your youth, but instead be an example unto the believers in faith, in conduct, in purity, and in, I think it was, do you know the last part? Speech? This is your homework. Go watch
Good
Good Works. So if you enjoyed the podcast, guys, I know that I did. I'm looking forward to doing another one. And thanks again, brother.
Amen.
All right, congratulations. If you made it to the end of the video, you're a 1%er. So do me a favor, do a couple things for me. Number one, share this with someone that you feel like will get tremendous value from this video. And then number two, we've got content that'll help you level up and bridge the gap in multiple areas of life. Your belief systems, your mindset, your body, your business, your brotherhood, your babe. So all you gotta do is hit the link right here to watch my most recent video on how to bridge the gap with your belief system, with your body, with your business, with your brotherhood, and help you find a babe. See you guys in the next video.